We got a tweet from Mario Knopfler. He says, Joe Rogan endorses RFK Jr. Quote, he's the only one that makes sense. We'll play the clip for you. I don't know if it was like a direct endorsement, but it's basically what Joe is saying.
That's politics. They do it on the left. They do it on the right. They gaslight you. They manipulate you. They promote narratives. And the only one who's not doing that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You a fan?
Yeah, I am a fan. Yeah, he's the only one that makes sense to me. He's the only one that he doesn't attack people. He attacks actions and ideas, but he's much more reasonable and intelligent. I mean, the guy was an environmental attorney and cleaned up the East River. I mean, he's a legitimate guy. You know, before anybody started calling him an anti-vaxxer, which I thought he was too. I thought he was this nut, this like conspiracy theorist nut, until I read his book. I read The Real Anthony Fauci, and I'm like, what is it? How much of this is real? These health organizations, insane amounts of money, and then also the government is in on it, and also the number is that these guys made off of these products.
Well, okay, I think we hit the point that he was making with RFK Jr. I'll tell you what I really think. I think Joe Rogan cannot endorse Trump.
Mm-hmm. He's going to have to watch out from the tweets from Cat Turd. Cat Turd might be coming after Joe Rogan pretty soon.
Well, meaningless. I think Joe Rogan's audience is too big, and I know a lot of people who are liberals who watch him. And I think Joe's concern is if he were to come out and say, look, RFK Jr. is probably better but can't win. So I think the only other option is Trump because Kamala makes no sense.
He's also in Texas. It kind of doesn't matter who he votes for.
Well, I mean, in Texas, I think
down ballot probably.
Texas actually is pretty close, especially with a lot of what's going on in Eagle Pass. But that being said, if Joe were to come out and endorse either candidate, it's going to have a massive negative impact on the entirety of his business. Mm-hmm. And I think he's taken the Michael Jordan route of conservatives buy shoes too, which is play the neutral road, don't endorse anybody. RFK Jr. is safe because he's not really in the game. And I don't think it's I don't think Joe has to endorse anybody.
Yeah, why?
So him saying he likes RFK Jr. and he makes the most sense doesn't mean he actually thinks he's the one you should vote for. That it's who he is going to be voting for.
Yeah. For those who are considering voting for a third-party candidate, especially if you are in a swing state, you're essentially throwing your vote away, and it doesn't serve any political purpose in that race. It could serve a political purpose insofar as you're saying, here's 2 or 3%, but in all cases, voting for the so-called lesser of two evils is how you actually practice politics. In reality, to have a protest vote in Jill Stein or RFK Jr. or something is a waste of your time and
I think maybe you don't feel this way.
I disagree.
I think a lot of people are voting for third-party candidates, whether it be RFK or a green ticket candidate or whatever, because they don't actually want to commit to a protest vote. It's sort of the third way out. You could either cast a vote for someone that you're like, I absolutely hate this person, I'm going to vote for their opponent, or you could be like, I'm just gonna go stand over here with these other people and watch from afar.
I think there's something about youth. So I saw Kyle Rittenhouse get kind of raked over the coals for saying he wants to write in Rand Paul. There's a couple things. Ron Paul. Yeah, sorry. The story is that when you're younger, you have less skin in the game. You don't have kids. You may not be married. You may not make as much income. And so you can be more idealistic. You can be a single issue voter. You can stand on principles and think it matters. As you get older, you get a little bit more pragmatic. You start realizing that outcomes are a little bit more important. So maybe you have a little bit more skin in the game. You understand maybe you're making more money and the realistic outcome changes. But I don't want to live in a country where if you say, hey, I don't agree with you politically, I want to vote for somebody else, that we have to cancel you, because that's gross to me. Because I grew up in the 80s and we didn't do that. And we didn't do that in the 90s either. Like, they were people that were friends that voted for, that didn't vote for Bill Clinton, and they still got along. Mm-hmm. You don't have to vote for the party that your friends do if we want to live in a reasonable America. So, I don't, honestly, and are you looking to Kyle Rittenhouse for political advice? I'm not. I might look to him for how to use the forward assist on an AR under stress. He did a good job with that. But at the end of the day, he's not making any decisions for me. I just think it's weird that we go and cancel people over that stuff.
I do not believe that if I were to have a conversation with Joe about the current state of U.S. affairs, that he could logically disagree with me about why Trump is the correct person to vote for. I am not saying Trump is perfect. I am not saying the right does not do the things that Joe is saying they do with gaslighting, whatever. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying based on the record we saw from Trump in the first place, I did not vote for him in 2016. There's a reason why I voted for him in 2020. Mm-hmm. And based on where we're at currently, I think the logical conclusion is, there's no reason to vote for RFK Jr. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump actually is a marginally net positive president for a lot of reasons in the political landscape. I am saying that Anybody who's honestly approaching the issues, the news, and what's currently happening in this country could not reasonably conclude there's anything else to do. That's why my immediate assumption is, and I mean no disrespect, that Joe is just trying to stay neutral to a certain degree. He's saying, I don't want. Yeah. But also consider this too. Joe's show is a massive red pill for a lot of people, especially with the COVID narrative and the lies.
Yep.
For people who are watching Joe, if he comes out and says Trump, and then instantly they're like, oh, he's a Trump guy. I can't watch his show anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of a sudden now, when Joe tries to tell them the truth, they're not going to want to listen to him.
That's right.
So it's the smartest thing, probably strategically, business-wise, and politically, when you have a show as big as his, to just say, I don't want to be involved in the politics. Listen to what we have to say. Because I tell you this, more people have probably voted for Trump and will vote for Trump because of Joe Rogan than anybody else, whether or not Joe says he's going to vote for him.
I think
he promotes working out. He makes everyone conservative.
Well,
he fascist. How dare you?
Joe calls out media lies and manipulations.
Right.
And then once you start digging into that and you realize you've been lied to, you end up looking into what Trump is actually doing. And I'm not saying every single person who does is going to vote for him. Some people might actually be lefty and be like, no, I don't like him. But a lot of people will wake up to the fake news and say, they lied about Trump. That wasn't true. I actually don't think he's that bad. And so I think, Tucker and Joe having the biggest podcast on Spotify is a massive white pill.
He touches things so softly. The way that he approaches things are something that nobody else is really doing, the way that he does it. And that's why he's been so successful. He doesn't come out and say, hey, I think all these really aggressive things. He says it softly. He says it in a funny way. But he's made people confront their own beliefs. It's like, hey, you believe this thing? Well, why do you believe that? Like, let's just turn it on its head and give us a skeptic approach, which is what we should be doing. Approaching people Socratically by asking questions, asking simple questions, and making people evaluate their beliefs. So I agree with you. He moves people to the right, but basically he moves people into asking basic sort of, if you assume this, if you want to believe this, why do you believe this? And can you justify it? And oftentimes, he brings on really interesting guests that kind of tell you other stuff. The weirdest thing I ever heard on Joe Rogan that has changed my mind about something, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I listened to Alex Jones and him talking about aliens. And Alex Jones flirting the idea that these could be human time travelers from way in the future that have basically don't need a physical body anymore in the same way, so they have huge evolved craniums. And I was like, oh my God, that makes way more sense than anything else that I've heard. It makes way more sense than people coming to spy on us like a petri dish. So I just took that away and I went, cool. Now I question what I think about things.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be on any particular thing. If you're willing to question anything that you're like, oh, I believe this to be true, take a moment, evaluate why. If there's something to sort of chip away at that, it makes you flexible. And I think it's good.
Yeah, but time travelers...
Come on.
No. It makes more sense that we're in a simulation, which is entertainment for an advanced species that use us to generate. It's basically an AI-generated sitcom, and Donald Trump is the main character.
I think RFK Jr. is closer to Trump than he is to Biden. So this is, in a way, a sort of endorsement
of policy or in personality.
In policy and personality, yeah. And I think there were phone calls between Donald Trump and RFK Jr. in the past, rumors of them potentially working together.
Well, there was a leaked phone call where Trump was asking for the endorsement. RFK apparently was like, "No, delete it. It's bad. We don't want to do that."
I don't know if these similar in terms of every policy, but I think he is more charismatic than Kamala Harris is. I think it would be a more interesting debate if you had RFK and Trump up, because I actually think they would probably go into policy, whereas it's just going to be a personality clash. I like that Joe Rogan has basically not endorsed. I mean, interesting that he's thrown his weight behind RFK, but I don't want celebrities to endorse people. I don't want people who own businesses that I like to endorse people. And maybe that's a little bit of political fatigue, which I actually think a lot of Americans are feeling. But I don't need to know who someone is. I don't need to know who everyone is voting for, right? There are some people whose advice or whose lifestyles or who something else might be meaningful to you, that they have a good grip on the economy, or they're really working hard on an issue that you are passionate about. So knowing who they think is a good candidate would matter, right? But to your point, one of the cool things about a lot of podcasters, but definitely Joe Rogan, is that it's just about the presentation of information and asking questions. And in some ways, getting him to just be like, I'm not voting. I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for, is powerful because it's more about you having to analyze critically the information and his takes on things and use your brain to come to a conclusion as opposed to being told, well, that's who this, star is voting for. So obviously you must vote for that person too.
And this RFK Jr., again, his impact on this race cannot be overstated,
Yeah, it's huge.
Especially as we're coming closer to November. Trump's clearly concerned because he's having phone calls with him. You have to imagine what's going on the Democrat side. So these guys are very concerned, and he's going to want a lot in return politically to potentially drop out down the line. He probably should down the line and use his political leverage for something, his political capital, and try to get some sort of position in the Trump administration, help Trump secure a win. But I think if it does go to November and he doesn't drop out, it'll actually severely hurt Trump. The more and more I see from RFK Jr. and the closer to election time we get, I see more similar. I think the average RFK supporter is more likely to have Trump as a second choice than Kamala Harris.
See, I
Maybe
think there are enough people who were going to default vote for Biden who are unhappy with Kamala that they will look for a third party candidate, whether it's RFK or someone else. I think that Kamala is not as strong with Democratic base as people would maybe like to believe.
It's this vaccine stuff because a lot of Trump's base was very concerned and didn't believe in had questions about the vaccines, of course. A lot of Trump's base did. And he was the Operation Warp Speed guy. He's saying the COVID-19 vaccine was mankind's biggest, largest achievement. And a lot of his base doesn't like that. And I think they were able to go to RFK Jr. as an alternative who is skeptical of many different COVID vaccines and different vaccines efficacies.
There are, maybe not for COVID, but there are a lot of progressives or left-wing people who are just kind of crunchy and don't like vaccine stuff.
That's who used to be in that camp.
Well, that's why RFK came from that
I feel like there's a lot of those diehard Trump supporters who are really ticked off about how the COVID vaccine stuff went down. There are a lot of diehard Trump supporters who are totally against Operation Warp Speed and
they just want him to stop talking about it.
And are willing to pivot over that issue.
I don't know if they're willing to pivot. I don't know if they are.
A small amount of them will be significant. It doesn't even have to be a large amount of them. Even a couple of percent in a couple of states is an issue. If RFK Jr. only gets 2, 3, 4%, that still has a huge impact on the swing states, even less.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.